This week, Yoni Shohet from Valence Security joins us to talk about SaaS Security. Then Teresa Lenowitz from AT&T and Chris Gettle from Yvanti are with us to discuss security's role in edge computing. Finally, in the enterprise security news, Ali Mellon joins us to discuss Cisco's massive Splunk acquisition and to discuss her thought-provoking essay on the blob that's poisoning the security industry. There was air quotes in there for the audio listeners. Depending on how much time we have after that, we might talk about funding from Dragos, Legit Security, Alcyon, Stoke, Rocket Chat, and Discern Security, and also acquisitions made by WatchGuard and Demotes. More Palo Alto acquisitions rumors. This time it's Dig Security, new tools and products, CISO budget struggles, and situations where security awareness vendors are more likely to maybe cause harm than to help. All that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
If your organization is ready to embrace edge computing, we have good news. The 2023 AT&T Cybersecurity Insights Report provides everything you need to know to get started. In the report, we identify the common characteristics of edge computing. We found edge use cases are rapidly coming online, and we reveal how to secure edge computing. Most importantly, you'll learn how to prepare for your edge ecosystem. Get your complimentary copy of the report today. Visit securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. That's securityweekly.com/ATT cybersecurity. The cybersecurity landscape is full of single solution providers, making it easy for unexpected cyber threats to sneak through the cracks. That's why Fortra is creating a stronger, simpler strategy for protection, one that increases your security maturity while decreasing the operational burden that comes with it. This is all possible thanks to Fortra's best-in-class portfolio and deep bench of expert problem solvers. Fortra's integrated, scalable solutions help customers face their toughest challenges with confidence. Learn more at securityweekly.com/Fortra, Fortra. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly and happy National Drink Beer Day. This is episode 333, recorded on Thursday, September 28th, 2023. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, and joining me is the czar of Zero Trust, a captain of content, and a top cybersecurity influencer, Katie Teitler. How are you, Katie?
I'm good, Adrian. Thank you for that creativity in my intro, just teeing me up for a snarky post coming up soon. But happy Drink Beer Day to you.
Yeah, and it is National Drink Beer Day. I don't know why it's September 27th, but that's what the crazy days of the year calendar told me it was. So that was the most interesting one of the 5 today.
It's the 28th, so hopefully you weren't beer goggling the National Calendar Day.
Yeah, correct. Thank you for correcting me. But
I just wanted to make sure we were on the right day.
Yes, we are on the right day, and that is today. It was not pulled from the 27th. Today really is National Drink Beer Day. Not that
you just had a few too manys and didn't.
No. Just
that's later.
Just got a lot rolling around in my head, which is why I partially have a script to kick me off with this podcast. All right, quick announcement, then we'll jump into our first interview. As a member of the Security Weekly community, we are pleased to offer you 50% off your AIDC 2023 tickets using code CRA50OFF, CRA50OFF. Join us on October 4th, 2023 in Pentagon City. ICIT, the nation's #1 cybersecurity think tank, brings together America's leading minds to discuss AI's impact on the country. Register today at securityweekly.com/AIDC 2023. All right, and today's topic is SaaS Security. We're excited to have Yoni Shohet, CEO and co-founder of Valence Security, with us today. He is ex-Israeli Defense Forces. This is his second startup. And full disclosure, he's also my boss at Valence. Welcome. How you doing, Yoni?
Hey, Adrian, it's great to be here. I feel too bad that I only have water and not beer, but it's great to be here.
Yeah, right. Should have warned everybody that was there was going to be a theme for the show today. So, the way this came about, a lot of our shows, I kind of dig into new markets, trying to understand them. And one of those that we've talked to, I think 3 times. I think we've talked to 3 separate companies, 3 separate founders on DSPM. And I realized we haven't really had anybody on to talk about SSPM. And since I happen to work for an SSPM vendor, made a lot of sense because that's my context for understanding this market is through the company that I work for. So it made sense to have you come on, Yoni. And it's honestly, I don't think this category gets enough coverage because we all use SaaS. It has become ubiquitous in our personal lives, in our work lives. And it seems kind of odd to me that we're just now, SaaS security is just now becoming this emerging market where there's this heavier focus on SaaS security. So I guess that's going to be my first question here is, a bit of a 2-part question. Why now? Why the emphasis on SaaS security just now and not maybe 10 years ago, right? Like Salesforce went public in 2004. SaaS has been around for a long time. And then why did you personally choose SaaS for your second startup?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. I think that obviously SaaS is not new. SaaS has been with us for the past couple of decades at least. And after the first wave of SaaS adoption, we've seen the emergence of CASBs, cloud access security brokers, in maybe about a decade ago. And we've seen also a lot of acquisitions of these vendors. And at that time, SaaS was maybe adopted in organizations, maybe had a dozen of core SaaS applications within each organization. And the SaaS applications themselves were very narrow, very focused on specific purposes. And over the past few years, what we've seen is 2 things. One is that SaaS have evolved to become much more complex platforms. Today, Zoom, even what we're using now for recording this podcast, then Zoom itself is now a platform that allows you to share data externally, to record calls, to add third-party apps, to add extensions. You can manage different users. You can leverage it to perform a lot of different actions. It has a marketplace to extend the value to addition ecosystem players. So the complexity of SaaS application has grown significantly over the past few years as SaaS has become much more mainstream. And the second aspect is that SaaS is everywhere, and SaaS is being adopted by everyone all the time. It's as easy as just setting up user credentials, clicking sign in with Google or Microsoft, spinning up a tenant, creating a new account. And usually the administration of SaaS applications today within organizations is not only by IT and security like it traditionally was, but it's now across the board. You have Salesforce admins in the sales and marketing or the revenue departments. You have GitHub admins in the development and R&D development departments, Workday admins in HR, and so on and so on. And basically what we're seeing is that the complexity of SaaS applications and the distributed ownership of SaaS applications combined are today challenges for security teams to actually control and manage the posture of all these different SaaS apps and ensuring that eventually the data, the permissions, the capabilities, the processes that they host sometimes are properly secure and not exposed due to a lack of hygiene, lack of knowledge of what is a secure configuration, and so on.
Yeah, and you mentioned CASB. It seemed, I covered that pretty closely in my time as an industry analyst, and it seemed like the focus was still very much allow, not allow. To a lot of them were in line. So it was still very much this kind of blocking mindset that security used to have, and you'd see things like you could take away features, or you could, add additional security controls. By taking away JavaScript and adding JavaScript in line to the DOM. And, it seemed like that combined with, hey, let us show you every single, all 1,000 SaaS that your employees are using, even if only one employee created an account once, it seemed like that approach didn't really stick. I haven't seen a whole lot of adoption on the enterprise side. And now it just seems like when you look at Netscope, which is one of the, probably one of the first and probably the most funded CASB of all time, CASB only shows up as one of its 13 products today. It touts itself as more of a SSE or a SASE these days. So, do you think, did you have the benefit of hindsight there? And there's still the question, why did you choose SaaS security and maybe not DSPM or one of these other emerging categories?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the CASB vendors are now merging or have already merged with secure web gateways and SWGs and with a zero trust network access in order to create really that SSC or SASE category, depending if it has SD1 or not. And basically applying zero trust access controls across all enterprise resources, regardless of whether or not there are SaaS applications. But today, even if you look at the traffic that goes between the end user and the SaaS application, it's typically not enough. Because what we're seeing today, attackers leverage is really the complexity of these SaaS applications. So one of the most popular attack methods that we see over the past couple of years is leverage of third-party integrations, OAuth tokens, API tokens, or basically these non-human identities between SaaS applications, and how today it's very easy for business users to extend, let's say, GitHub to an additional SaaS application just by creating an API token and providing that API token to that third-party vendor. This entire communication between these two applications doesn't go through enterprise resources. Therefore, all the CASBs, SSEs, SASEs don't really control and manage those communications. And monitoring and managing these configurations has become key in order to really ensure that you have a strong enough security posture. And what we've seen and through our ideation process and why we eventually decided to start Valence is that when we spoke with a lot of security teams, they were the perception was, I got an IDP, an identity provider that enforces single sign-on and MFA, and it ensures strong authentication to my SaaS apps, and therefore I'm secure. But the reality is that even if you have the strongest authentication between your users and your SaaS applications, the amount of third-party vendors, external collaborators, and mistakes your business users can make in this entire access world that is not governed by your identity provider is so significant that at the time it seemed like a good area to focus on because it was just underserved. And we've seen the initial cases of attacks. So I think I always joke that security companies are sometimes like mushrooms after the rain, which is a frame like something we say a lot of times in Hebrew. And basically after the SolarWinds attack campaign, one of the techniques that attackers used is that they leverage tokens that were generated for third-party vendors and leverage these tokens that were just not monitored to gain access to core SaaS applications, mostly Microsoft 365. And from that aspect, and seeing that today this is really an underserved and underlooked area, we decided to really focus our company on securing these SaaS applications and against modern risks that are related to the complexity of these configurations. And over time, it evolved to more and more capabilities that really allow today eventually security teams to understand the risks and also apply the proper remediation actions to decrease the risk. And I think obviously there are always great opportunities in the cybersecurity world. That's why we're seeing so many new companies started and so many acquisitions and funding. But I think also obviously it's tightly related also to the DSPM space, because eventually the promise of DSPM is you don't know where your data is, and you need to make sure that you have proper controls to protect your data. And this primarily focuses on IaaS and infrastructure as a service and SaaS, so apps like OneDrive, SharePoint, Google Drive, and even apps that you don't think about, like NetSuite has the ability to host documents and share them externally. Same goes for Salesforce, Zoom, GitHub. Almost every SaaS application today allows you to host data on it and to share it with external collaborators. And this is very well tied to also the DSPM world, but more focused on the SaaS prisma rather than the data Prisma in terms of how we try to address and tackle these issues.
So a few minutes ago, you brought up one of the biggest problems that I think there is today with SaaS applications. It's that security people know the inherent risks. They can identify the vulnerabilities. They can identify when there are problems. But have you also found that part of the problem and part of the complexity is that a lot of times security isn't involved with SaaS application, either procurement, deployment, or usage at all? I mean, I've certainly seen that, but you're more in this space, so I'm curious as to your experience with how you handle that, the different business owners of these things and managing them from a security standpoint, but also operational efficiency standpoint.
Yeah, it's funny. When we started Valence, we had a very specific vision on certain technology tools that we wanted to build for this space. And after we did our first risk assessment for our first customer, we gave them a list of all the third-party integrations that they needed to manage within their Microsoft 365 environment. And there were a few hundred integrations there. And we went over the list, and almost every single entry there, the CISO told us, I don't know what this is. I need to go ask him. I don't know what this is. I need to go ask her. I don't know what this is. I need to go ask. I need to go ask. I need to go ask. And almost at that point, we realized that just showing the visibility and telling the security teams, hey, here's another list of problems that you're not going to solve because you have no idea why they were created in the first place, and it will be easier for you not to touch them and not to know about them, rather than to see this long list of problems and see this red dashboard that we can build. We incorporated into our platform the ability to collaborate with the business users, meaning eventually there's a very simple question that security teams want, or questions that security teams want to ask business users, and we can automate that process through Slack bots or email bots or whatever the platform is, in order to communicate and collaborate with the business users, collect from them the context, and provide that to the security team in an automated way, in order to allow eventually our remediation capabilities to automate the processes and to eventually to lead to risk reduction. And what we found out is that eventually the business users and the business admins, they want to make sure that their platforms are secure, because they know it's also their liability, because shared responsibility is not just between the business users or the customer and the vendor, but it's also between internally between the different business units. And what we found out is that eventually when you provide the right context, the right explanation to the relevant people, they either give feedback, provide the missing business context, or take the right action to the remediation. And that's where kind of our collaboration and automation and remediation come together in order to facilitate a decision-making process that usually has a human in the loop. But the beauty is that the human in the loop doesn't need to be from the security team. It can be from the business unit, because they know why they connected app X to, or Gong to Salesforce, for example. They know why they did it, and they know if they don't need it anymore, or if it's something that they're just evaluating and forgot to remove, or something like that. So that building that platform that allows you to communicate and collaborate with the business users, and also to explain and create a common language between security and business units, is a key to enable that, eventually, that path towards risk reduction.
Now, I know Adrian has another question coming up, but I'm going to step in here just for a second, Adrian, and follow up on your question, or on your comment, because I'm curious as to whether this awareness, because awareness is great, but it's the foundation, right? You see what you've got, you let the business owners know. But have you seen the visibility aspect actually affect the management of these SaaS apps, or the responsibility for these SaaS apps? In other words, is getting non-security people involved in governance of SaaS apps helping people understand the risks and then manage it? So is there sort of a chain of responsibility that's coming with that, or are we still super early in the process?
So what we see is, for example, one of our recent onboarding, the first thing the security team did is they onboarded the Salesforce admin with read-only access to the Valence platform to see all their security misconfigurations. And what that admin focused on in the first 3-4 weeks of the platform is to make sure that they increase the risk score, reduce the risk score from 23% of past security configurations to 83%. And the main reason they were able to do that is because they received a very well digested in Salesforce terminology of what's the misconfiguration, how they can fix it, and how to go and perform it really in the Salesforce platform. And that allowed the security team, all they had to do is only to provide them access to a platform that explained to the business users, or in this case to the business admins, what to do. And this creates that culture of collaboration where the business admins are the ones that are making the change and making the fixes, and the security team are governing it with the right policies and guardrails, saying, hey, you can run fast. And maybe to Adrian's point earlier, we don't want to block all your features in SaaS applications, because otherwise, why are we using them? Let's enable the SaaS applications and their features, but let's ensure that we have the proper guardrails, or that at least we make conscious decisions on what we enable and what we disable. And that once that's done together and done in shared visibility and shared platforms, then that creates the proper trust. So nobody needs to block anything, and that eventually the business user can be as most productive as possible by leveraging the most innovative tools.
Yeah, so that's you talked about making it a conscious decision. Yes, this is configured this way, not out of not because we haven't looked at it, because we haven't touched it yet. We don't even know that configuration is there, but we intend it to actually be configured this way. Yeah, I wonder if you've seen some particularly bad or head scratching default configs that everybody should just go into this particular SaaS app and change it. Like, it doesn't make any sense for it to be, or most people are surprised when they see that this is the default configuration. Do you have any examples there?
Yeah, so for example, when we developed our Zoom connector, we scanned for external recordings that are shared with anybody with a link. They included a passcode, but this passcode is embedded in the link that you send out anyhow. And apparently the default setting is that when you record or at least in our tenant, it was the default setting, when you record a session on Zoom, it's automatically shared with anybody with a link. So it's not shared only with the participants, it's not shared with access controls, it's shared with anybody with a link, with a password, but it's shared with anybody with a link, which was pretty surprising, because when we developed it, I started to reach out. So we obviously eat our own dog food or drink our own champagne and use Valence internally. So we looked at it and we said, oh, look at all our salespeople. They recorded a bunch of calls and now they're sharing it with anybody with a link. Why would they share that? And then they just said, we didn't do anything. This was by default. It was very surprising to see that was kind of the default settings and the default configurations.
Yeah, especially considering the password. I mean, might as well not have a password if the link is the password, right? It's like having the name of the resource also be your encryption key, right?
Yeah.
And also, I kind of want to dive into, the market, some experiences selling this product, what you're seeing. You talked about one of the aha moments with the very first customer being just that visibility, specifically into integrations. Where are people generally in the market? Are they aware that SaaS security is something they should be worried about, and they're just deferring it and choosing not to tackle it yet? Or, are people still very much unaware of the level of misconfiguration and issues that there can be in SaaS?
So I think the awareness is quite there. We're starting to see a lot of large organizations with active SaaS security projects. I think maybe the biggest challenge for security teams is also, to our point earlier, is that it's hard for them to define a clear ownership for who needs to tackle it, even within the security team. If we refer, for example, to DSPM, then DSPM is usually assigned to the data security team, if there is one. And I think SaaS security can be in between different types of ownerships within the security teams. And sometimes even they try to defer to the business technology or the IT team. But I think the awareness and understanding that SaaS risks are real, especially with the rise of also MFA fatigue type of attacks where, I have one of our customers told us that they did a pen testing, a social engineering pen testing process. And one of the things that the pen testers did is that they texted some of the employees a message saying, hey, you're now logging in from London. Can you please provide us your 2FA so you can log in? And employees just shared their 2FA. They went into the app and they shared the 2FA. And then the security team asked them, why did you do that? And they said, oh, we have an office in London, so we thought it makes sense for us to do that. And I think that the awareness today that these types of attacks, and we're seeing very high-profile breaches that typically originate with somebody got an access token, whether if it's a human or a non-human access token, to a SaaS application, Okta, Microsoft 365, Slack, Google, GitHub, whatever it is, and that leads to eventually to either the initial access or to access to the most core and sensitive data within the organization, is bringing the awareness to the right place. And it's mostly the security teams trying to figure out from an operational perspective, how do they create the right structure so they can manage and run it within the organization.
Yeah, and you mentioned what we've seen from breaches. Another thing that we tend to see in breaches forever is the lack of visibility. The new domain admins are created, nobody notices. Antivirus is disabled, nobody notices. And we tend to see that in SaaS as well. We've seen global admin cases where global Google Workspace admins and Microsoft 365 admins were created. And a month later, nobody had noticed those kinds of things. And there are other vendors in this space that kind of started with like a detection and response focus, whereas ours is more Valence's is more governance, hygiene, understanding your configurations and what's currently there. How important do you think that is, and is that how hard a problem do you think that is to tackle, the actual detection and response piece of this?
Yeah, so I think the detection and response, in order for it to be effective, and this is why we also saw it for other plays that we've seen in the industry, not only in SaaS, context is king or queen. And without having context for the detection and the events that you see, it's very difficult to ensure that you're able to remediate and resolve the issues that you detect. So being able to detect and understand, hey, somebody did something weird without understanding the context of who is somebody, what are they, what else did they do, what are they doing at other platforms, and correlating all that information is very, very difficult. And unfortunately, a lot of detection and response tools are very noisy in terms of what they're able to detect. For example, we spoke about CASB, so impossible travel is CASB 101, and it's probably one of the most hated features that we've seen within security platforms. But I think that with the proper context and proper understanding of this is the bigger picture and this is the event, these are the events that are related to it, it really helps the detection and response to be more effective, more targeted, and probably also with less false positive, at least from our experience. When you combine that with the proper context, that allows you to eventually tackle the most urgent or important aspects, because there's a difference. For example, if an EDR detected that my endpoint was compromised, there's a difference between if I'm a Salesforce admin or not, right? It changes how I address that risk. So combining the posture and the configurations with the detection and response provides a lot of value from what we're seeing within organizations.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Like you're talking about before, oh, we've got an office in London, that's probably fine. Maybe the fact is during some of these breaches, they did see some of the activity, and because they don't have that context, they see a login from London, they think, oh, we've got an office in London. Maybe that's fine. Maybe they are seeing the attackers and just explaining it away as something normal in their environment because they don't understand enough about the context surrounding those activities, those events.
Right.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. So So we've talked a lot about, I mentioned DSPM early, is another interesting category that we've talked about on here. We haven't talked about ASPM that much, and we're starting to see some consolidation in the industry. I think we saw an ASPM acquired last week. There's a rumor this week about Palo Alto maybe being interested in Dig. And CSPMs have been around for a while now. Some of the largest cybersecurity companies are now, I guess they're branding as CNAPs. But with all the posture management here, what does the future of the market, do you think, look like? Do we have one posture management for everything, or is the split between SaaS and cloud, and who cares about those areas? And you mentioned if you have a data security department, they're going to be the ones managing DSPM. Does it make sense for these tools to remain separate, or do you see some consolidation happening here?
Yeah, so I think if we look at the equivalent in the detection and response space, right? So we had EDRs, NDRs, and a bunch of DRs that eventually consolidated into XDR because it targeted the same persona that needs to detect and respond to these threats. In SPM or XSPM, to your point, it's not always the same persona, but the events are related. So if I have a user that has too much access to data, and they're also an admin in my AWS and also an admin in my Microsoft 365, then these three data points are obviously interesting, the correlation between them. But I don't want to go to my SSPM, my CSPM, and my DSPM and to see all that data points together there. So the correlation between XSPM's data points is interesting. I'm not sure if it's going to be through a consolidated platform, because I think there are different buyers and operators for each one of these platforms. But I think through maybe integrations where, let's say, for example, we connect to a CSPM and we pull from there the connecting tissue, which is the identity aspect, and we see through the identity how the user that we see or the account that we see on our SSPM is related to also the risk score or the posture element in the cloud infrastructure or in data or in different aspects, could create an interesting correlation. Same goes for if you look at the triangle of ASPM, DSPM, and CSPM. There's an app, it runs on a cloud, it has access to data. It needs to be eventually correlated. And that's why you see in certain aspects, let's say CSPMs that claim that they have DSPM components built into them. So you don't need another dedicated tool. I assume we'll see the same thing with ASPM and CSPM and DSPM. So we'll see maybe consolidation through certain aspects of these capabilities, but there is justification for the personas that it's targeting to have a more dedicated approach for the risk posture management of each one of these risk surfaces.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because like with Microsoft 365 and Azure, I feel like the line is very blurry between the two. In fact, sometimes when we see these, we're analyzing these breaches and how they happened and trying to determine, is this something that SaaS security could help with, or is this more of a CSPM, CNAP type of situation? Honestly, sometimes I have to go to our product team, to our research team, and ask them, like, what side of the line does this fall on? Because a lot of times you're using the same identities in both places, right? Like the identity you're checking your email with, you might also be doing some engineering in Azure with.
Yeah, definitely. So I think especially in the Microsoft ecosystem, you have Entra ID, or formerly known as Azure AD, as kind of the connecting between multiple different elements, including the cloud infrastructure, the SaaS apps, and different elements. And managing the security of that connecting element is critical to secure each one of the components within your whatever the SPM is, or whatever the cloud service is.
Yeah, and that's kind of tricky, right? Like, because everything is SaaS. Like, if I log into the AWS console, that's SaaS. If I log into the Azure's console, our own product is SaaS, right. And what most security products are, like we've seen the Tenables and Rapid7s, like even the vulnerability managers. Yeah, they might have a scanning engine on-prem somewhere, but the product itself is all SaaS. So, where does it begin and end? What do we protect or not protect with like a SaaS security tool?
Yeah, so I think unfortunately it doesn't end. That's the issue, right? So even if you try to create like a clear borderlines, and then you look at something like Microsoft Power Platform, right? So Microsoft Power Platform, the identities could be managed in the Azure AD, but Microsoft Power Platform could have tokens to anywhere, even to other SaaS applications. And then you have automated processes and machine to machine and automated activities that you need to start managing that are related to how you eventually manage your SaaS app. So I think when you look at the combination between human identities, non-human identities, and the different configurations, then typically the attack path between all these different SaaS services is endless, and you need to manage it as if there's a continuous process that runs between all these different SaaS applications.
Which is why you might see Valence announcing some partnerships with some other companies here, right?
Could be, yeah.
Let's see. Yeah, so just talking about like getting the product up and running. The challenge of we were talking about bringing in the Salesforce admin, giving them read-only access so they can see and they can improve the security score, the configuration score. How big of a challenge is that for the security team to go out, find those stakeholders, get them to, because in a lot of these cases, it's somebody outside of IT, somebody outside of security that has to actually connect up their SaaS to Valence's product, right? How much of a challenge is that, especially, if you've got clients up in the dozens of apps that they're connecting in here?
Yeah, so it depends on the SaaS app. Some are very easy, and obviously on the organization. Some is more difficult, or some are more difficult. But I think the forward-looking organizations, typically you see close collaboration between these teams that allow them to work together to create a better process and guardrails for the business units to use the best-in-class tools. Obviously, it's more challenging if before looking at a platform that does SaaS security, if the security team never spoke with the Salesforce admin, then there's a challenge. But typically what we see is that there was already some kind of an attempt. Whether if it was successful or not, that's a different case. But they do see that our platform could be that base communication knowledge and the ability to communicate with the same terms between the different SaaS, between the different owners within the organization.
And something else that seems like a challenge, just talking about how different SaaS apps can be. Some SaaS apps might have multiple APIs, for different parts of the applications, or maybe they have multiple applications. They might have a lot of API endpoints, and different things you can do with the API or within the product, or they might have just a few. How difficult is it with each SaaS app being unique and no normalization between the SaaS apps, even on how they handle something simple? Like I've seen some SaaS apps where enforcing MFA is a 2 or 3 step process. There's a couple different configuration things you need to check, and with others, it's literally just a single checkbox. How much of a challenge is it just determining like how much work it's going to take to build these connectors? Was the second group of 5 SaaS apps easier to build for than the first 5, for example?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning, you need to understand what's the data structure and what's the common elements between the different SaaS applications. But understanding how that data structure relates to every different SaaS application is a challenge that you need to make sure that you continuously reassess, because every SaaS application has its own terms, its own permission model. They hide the same capabilities, legacy capabilities across different platforms. So there are certain applications where we're seeing, let's say, for example, 7 different ways to create third-party integrations. Now, why would a SaaS application need 7 different ways? Because they started with one for a specific purpose, then they bought another company, embedded it into the platform, and then they had a different authentication method, and they created kind of a complex structure that eventually tries to simplify the user experience for the business users and the end users, but creates a complex structure for security teams to enforce security controls and to ensure that they apply the proper security measures. So I think that the short answer is that every SaaS application is a world of its own, and you need to be able to support it and to understand it in depth. And that's kind of the value that we see a lot of times that customers come to us and say, hey, listen, we're not experts in platform X. We need you to explain to us what we need to know about platform X. That's why we have a team of security researchers that day in, day out look into these different platforms and look for issues and look for opportunities for security teams to improve their security posture by leveraging the native controls, because that's eventually what you're dependent on, right? If it's a SaaS application, all you can do is turn on and off controls that the SaaS app has exposed and provided you. You can't build or modify or change aspects that are not deliberately configurable by the SaaS application vendor.
Yeah, and you mentioned something earlier, like when the Salesforce admin is looking at the findings in the product, it's speaking their language, right? Like if you do have an administrator, that's in as deep a world as like Salesforce, is an entire career. Like you can have an entire career of just configuring Salesforce and running Salesforce for people, and you've got to speak their language. So that's it seems like that's kind of key here. Like you can't use the Microsoft name for API keys when you're talking to a Salesforce person, and vice versa if they refer to those things with different terms.
Right. We even try to leverage generative AI and OpenAI, and we have it embedded in our platform. So if there are, let's say, security configurations that are too complex, either for business admins because they don't understand the security terms, or for security teams because they don't understand the native SaaS application terms, then they can leverage the power of Gen AI to get better answers and explanations about why they should care and why something matters within SaaS applications.
Yeah, and I guess my last one of my last questions here is where does it go from here? Because there are one of the things that CASBs did first off, which I think hurt them, is they tried to discover as many SaaS apps in use as possible, which to me, from a CISO or a security leader perspective is pretty overwhelming. Like I don't want to go from thinking I have 12 SaaS apps in use to all of a sudden knowing I have 600 SaaS apps in use. There's nothing I can do with 600. Even if I devote a single day to each SaaS app, I won't have enough days in a year to get to 600. So, from Valence's perspective, I wouldn't think that you need to build 600 SaaS connectors, but where is that sweet spot? Like how much are you getting a sense for? Do you have to build for companies? Because there's going to be a long tail. Nobody's ever going to support the app that only a dozen people out there use. Where's that? Do you have a sense for where that sweet spot is and how far out we need to build?
Yeah, from what we see, there are maybe a couple dozen of core SaaS applications that are business critical that need coverage. Then there's a second tier of a few dozen that are important but not as important. And then there's a long tail of SaaS applications that you just want to know if the business users are using them. So I think what we'll see is that eventually a SaaS security platform helps you tightly manage and in-depth manage your core SaaS apps, provide you with proper security controls for your second tier, and helps you understand the usage and adoption of your long tail of SaaS applications, and allows you through that to see the complete life cycle. But to your point about the frustration you mentioned from CASBs, is it has to be actionable and it has to be focused on
Right.
automation and remediation. Otherwise, you're just giving the security team another dashboard, and they have too many dashboards as it is. And they need actions, and they need the ability to show their peers and their internal counterparts, hey, we were here, now we're here, or now we're here, depending if you want to look high, if up and down is better or worse. But we were able to reduce risk using something and not just increase our risk.
Right, and I think that's an excellent note to end on there. Yeah, it's got to be something you can take action on. Yoni, thank you so much for joining us on Enterprise Security Weekly today. Perfect.
Thank you for having me.
All right, stay tuned. When we come back, we're going to talk securing edge computing with Teresa Lanowitz from AT&T and Chris Goettel from Yvanti.